Have you ever stopped to consider how the words you speak, whether to others or to yourself, shape your reality? Think about it. The phrases we use every day don't just reflect our mindset, they reinforce it. They shape how we see ourselves, how we interact with the world, and even how others perceive us. Language isn't just a means of communication, it's a tool for personal development, and often it's a mirror of our intelligence and self awareness. That's why highly intelligent people tend to be especially careful with their words. It's not because they're trying to sound smart or impressive. Rather, it's because they understand that certain phrases can subtly reinforce a fixed mindset, close doors to new ideas, or undermine meaningful conversations. These phrases aren't necessarily rude or offensive. In fact, many of them are incredibly common. You've likely heard them and maybe even said them yourself, but when used regularly, they can quietly limit growth, stifle curiosity, and prevent genuine self improvement. In this video, we're going to explore 10 phrases that highly intelligent people never use, and more importantly, why they avoid them. These aren't just empty cliches or motivational slogans, they're practical insights that can help you shift your mindset, improve your relationships, and communicate with greater clarity and intention. Each phrase we'll look at represents a subtle roadblock, a way we unconsciously hold ourselves back. By becoming aware of these patterns, you can begin to replace them with language that empowers you, keeps you open to learning, and fosters deeper, more authentic connections with others. By the end of this video, you'll have not just a list of phrases to avoid, but a clearer sense of the kind of thinking and language that supports a more intelligent, reflective, and growth-oriented life. Let's get started with the first phrase. One of the most common and deceptively limiting phrases we use is, "I already know that." On the surface, it might seem harmless, even confident, but in reality, it often signals a subtle closing of the mind. It's a phrase that cuts off the possibility of learning before it even begins. Think about how often this response comes up in everyday conversations. You're watching a tutorial, sitting through a meeting, or talking with a friend, and someone mentions a concept or idea you've heard before. The instinct to say, "I already know that," kicks in, almost like a mental shortcut. But what's really happening here is that we're tuning out, assuming there's nothing new to gain, and unintentionally shutting down a moment that could have deepened our understanding or offered a new perspective. Highly intelligent people avoid this phrase not because they know less, but because they know better. They recognize that true learning is layered. You can revisit a familiar concept dozens of times and still discover something new. What sets intelligent people apart is their practice of intellectual humility, the understanding that no matter how much they know, there's always more to uncover. They're not afraid to say, "I've heard of that. What's your take on it?" Or, "Tell me more about how you see it." These kinds of responses keep the door open to growth and often lead to insights they wouldn't have found on their own. A more constructive alternative to "I already know that" is something like, "That's interesting. How did you come to that conclusion?" Or, "I've learned about that before, but I'd love to hear your perspective." Not only do these responses keep you engaged, but they also invite collaboration, show respect for others' insights, and often spark deeper conversations. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus wisely said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." This quote captures the heart of the issue. Arrogance, or even just mental complacency, blocks curiosity. Stoicism teaches that humility is the foundation of wisdom. When we believe we already know everything there is to know, we stop evolving. But when we remain open, even to familiar ideas, we sharpen our understanding and allow wisdom to deepen. Here's a practical challenge. The next time you find yourself thinking, "I already know this," pause. Instead of disengaging, ask a question. What's different about this explanation? What can I learn from this person's experience? What nuance did I overlook before? These small shifts in response can open big doors, because true intelligence isn't about having all the answers. It's about staying curious, humble, and always ready to learn. This phrase often shows up when someone is struggling and we feel it doesn't directly concern us. Maybe a coworker is dealing with a tough project that's outside your department, or a friend mentions a personal hardship you don't know how to fix. Saying, "That's not my problem," might seem like a way to protect your time or energy, but it also shuts down the human connection that intelligent emotionally aware individuals strive to maintain. Highly intelligent people, especially those with strong emotional intelligence, tend to avoid this kind of response. That's because they understand something simple but powerful. We're all interconnected. Even if a situation doesn't fall squarely on your plate, the way you respond to it affects your relationships and your character. Intelligent people know that empathy, cooperation, and support, even in small ways, strengthen teams, communities, and friendships. They don't try to solve everything, but they do make it clear they care. Instead of saying, "That's not my problem," consider a more constructive alternative. "Is there any way I can assist with this?" Or, "I hope you're able to find a good solution. Let me know if there's a way I can support." These responses acknowledge the other person's struggle without taking on responsibility you can't manage. They show that you're engaged, respectful, and emotionally intelligent. Small shift in attitude from disinterest to curiosity creates stronger bonds and demonstrates a kind of intelligence that goes beyond facts and logic. Because in the end, how we treat others in seemingly insignificant moments reveals the depth of our character. And intelligent people know caring doesn't always mean agreeing or being deeply invested. It means being present, being respectful, and choosing connection over dismissal. One phrase we often hear, especially in moments of disappointment or frustration, is, "It's not fair." While it may feel like a natural reaction, this statement rarely leads to growth or clarity. Instead, it tends to reinforce a victim mentality where we focus more on the injustice itself than on how we can respond to it. People usually say it's not fair when something doesn't go their way. A promotion is given to someone else, a rule seems biased, or life simply throws a challenge that feels undeserved. While unfairness is a reality of life, constantly pointing it out does little to change the situation. In fact, it often keeps us stuck, waiting for justice instead of seeking a path forward. Highly intelligent people tend to avoid this phrase. That's not because they're blind to injustice, but because they understand that dwelling on what's unfair doesn't change it. What does create change is action, taking control of what can be controlled and letting go of what can't. These individuals understand that life doesn't always deal us equal cards, but what matters is how we play the hand we've been given. Instead of saying, "It's not fair," consider a more constructive response. What can I do in this situation? Or how can I grow or improve for next time? These questions shift your focus from the injustice to your personal power. They move you from being stuck in resentment to stepping into resilience. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most well-known Stoic philosophers, captured this mindset perfectly when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the obstacle itself becomes the path forward if we're willing to see it that way. Stoicism teaches us that while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can always control how we respond. And that response determines our strength, our character, and ultimately our progress. Here's a practical tip. When you find yourself thinking or saying, "It's not fair," pause. Instead of venting or withdrawing, ask yourself, what's the next best step I can take? Or what lesson can I draw from this? This doesn't mean denying your feelings or pretending everything's okay. It means choosing not to let frustration define your response. Because at the end of the day, fairness may be out of your hands, but your mindset, your choices, and your actions never are. Intelligent people know that complaining won't build a better future, but courage, clarity, and action will. Few phrases shut down a conversation faster than the blunt statement, "You're wrong." It might seem like a direct way to express disagreement, but in reality, it often creates defensiveness, tension, and conflict. Instead of encouraging open dialogue or mutual understanding, it turns the conversation into a competition. One person wins and the other loses. And once people feel attacked, they stop listening. While it's natural to want to correct misinformation or challenge an idea we strongly disagree with, highly intelligent people understand that how we express disagreement matters just as much as what we're saying. They don't avoid disagreement, but they approach it with humility and tact, aiming to explore the truth, not to dominate the conversation. That's because intelligent individuals, especially those who are emotionally and socially aware, know that the goal of a good conversation isn't to prove someone wrong, it's to learn. to understand, and maybe even to help both parties grow. When they hear something they disagree with, they resist the urge to label it wrong outright. Instead, they take a collaborative approach. They might say, "That's an interesting perspective. Here's how I see it," or "I've read something different. What do you think about this angle?" These kinds of responses keep the discussion going, show respect, and invite the other person to consider a new point of view without feeling dismissed. Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic emperor known for his wisdom and restraint, once wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change." This is the heart of Stoic humility. Instead of seeing disagreement as a threat, Stoics saw it as an opportunity to learn and refine their thinking. They believed that being corrected was not a sign of weakness, but a step toward truth and wisdom. Here's a practical tip. When you find yourself in a disagreement, pause before jumping in with correction. First, validate what you've heard. Even if you don't agree with it, you might say, "I can see where you're coming from," or "That's a valid concern." Then offer your view. "Here's another way to look at it," or "This is what I've learned from my experience." This approach doesn't water down your opinion. It makes it more likely to be heard. In the end, intelligent communication isn't about being right. It's about being wise. It's about recognizing that respectful dialogue fosters connection, that openness leads to growth, and that real strength lies not in winning arguments, but in understanding people. One of the most limiting phrases we can tell ourselves is, "I can't do that." On the surface, it may seem like a simple admission of a limitation, but in truth, it often reflects something deeper, a fixed mindset. This mindset assumes that our abilities are static, that we're either capable or we're not, and that if we don't already know how to do something, we probably never will. This phrase is especially common when facing something unfamiliar or intimidating, a new job responsibility, a personal goal, or a challenge that pushes us outside our comfort zone. But when we say, "I can't," we're not just acknowledging a current limitation. We're closing the door on the possibility of growth, learning, and transformation. Highly intelligent people avoid saying, "I can't do that," not because they believe they're capable of everything right away, but because they recognize the potential for development. They understand that most skills and strengths are built through effort, persistence, and curiosity, not innate talent. Their mindset is focused on progress, not perfection. Instead of defining themselves by current limitations, they ask, "What can I do to grow into this?" That's why they're more likely to say things like, "I'll figure it out," or "I'd like to learn how to do that." These responses shift the focus from what's lacking to what's possible. They keep the door open to opportunity and reflect a belief that improvement is always within reach, even if it takes time. The Stoic philosopher Seneca captured this truth when he wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, but because we do not dare that they are difficult." In other words, most of our perceived limitations exist not in the challenge itself, but in our hesitation to face it. Stoicism teaches that discomfort is not something to avoid, it's something to engage with because it's often where growth begins. Here's a practical tip. The next time you catch yourself thinking or saying, "I can't do that," pause and ask, "What would it take for me to try?" Or, "What's one small step I could take to start learning this?" You don't need to know how to do everything right away. You just need the willingness to try, the humility to learn, and the belief that change is possible. Because in the end, intelligent people know that most "I can'ts" are really just "I haven't learned yet." And with the right mindset, those words can become the starting point, not the end. The phrase, "That's impossible," is more than just a declaration, it's a mindset. Often said in moments of overwhelm or disbelief, this phrase quickly shuts down creative thinking and problem solving. It creates a mental wall where there could have been a window. While it may feel like a realistic statement in the face of difficult tasks or bold ideas, it often reflects more about our perception of limits than the reality of the situation. People use "that's impossible" to avoid risk, to protect themselves from failure, or to justify inaction. But history is filled with examples of people who achieved what others thought couldn't be done. From scientific breakthroughs to personal transformations, these moments didn't happen because the odds were always favorable. They happen because someone somewhere refused to accept impossible as the final word. Highly intelligent people tend to steer clear of this phrase. It's not that they're blindly optimistic, but that they understand how powerful mental framing is. When they encounter a problem, their first instinct isn't to reject it, it's to explore it. They don't assume something is unachievable just because it's difficult or unfamiliar. Instead, they ask, how might this be possible? Or what would it take to make progress here? Rather than saying, that's impossible, a more constructive response might be, that sounds challenging, but let's explore how we can approach it. This kind of language keeps the door open to innovation. It encourages creative thinking, collaboration, and resilience, all essential qualities for navigating a world that's constantly evolving. Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic emperor and thinker, once wrote, I will encounter difficulties, but I am equipped to face them. This perspective lies at the heart of Stoic philosophy. Life will present obstacles, but we are not powerless in the face of them. Stoics didn't deny hardship. They accepted it, prepared for it, and used it as a training ground for strength and wisdom. Here's a practical tip. The next time you're tempted to think something is impossible, pause and reframe. Ask yourself, what exactly makes this feel impossible? Break the situation down into smaller, manageable parts. What step could you take today? Who could you ask for insight? Often, the barrier isn't the problem, it's the way we're looking at it. By replacing that's impossible with a problem-solving mindset, you shift from limitation to possibility. And that shift can be the first step toward doing something remarkable, something that once seemed out of reach. Intelligent people understand this truth well. What we label as impossible is often just something we haven't figured out yet. The phrase, that's just how it is, often slips out when we encounter something frustrating, broken, or seemingly unchangeable. On the surface, it may sound like a neutral observation, but in reality, it's often a quiet form of resignation, a way of surrendering our power to question, to improve, or to lead change. It signals a belief that the situation can't be helped and that any effort to change it would be pointless. This kind of thinking can be especially dangerous in environments that demand growth, whether it's a workplace that's stuck in outdated practices, a relationship pattern that isn't working, or a personal habit that needs to be addressed. When we say, that's just how it is, we're not describing reality, we're defending it, even if it no longer serves us. And that defense, however subtle, keeps us from progress. Highly intelligent people avoid this phrase not because they reject reality, but because they know that most realities are changeable. They understand that systems, behaviors, and outcomes can all be improved, even if slowly, even if imperfectly. Rather than resigning themselves to the way things are, they ask, why is it this way? And more importantly, does it have to stay this way? Their mindset is rooted in possibility, not passivity. Instead of saying, that's just how it is, try reframing with curiosity and intention. What could we do differently? Or how can we start changing this? These questions shift the focus from helplessness to action. They open the door for innovation, dialogue, and transformation, even in situations that seem fixed. This mindset aligns closely with Stoic wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, the very thing that seems like a dead end is often the starting point for growth, if we choose to see it that way. Stoicism doesn't ignore harsh realities, but it refuses to be paralyzed by them. It teaches us to use challenges as fuel for progress. Here's a practical tip. The next time you hear or think, that's just how it is, pause and challenge it. Ask yourself, is that really true or just familiar? What small step could make this better? Even incremental improvements begin with the decision to question the status quo, because intelligent people know that accepting things blindly is rarely wisdom. True intelligence lies in noticing what needs to change, believing change is possible, and having the courage to take the first step even when no one else has. The phrase, you're lucky, may seem like a compliment, but it often carries an unintended sting. When someone has achieved something meaningful, whether it's landing a great job, starting a successful business, or maintaining a healthy lifestyle, calling them lucky can subtly dismiss the hard work, sacrifices, and deliberate effort that went into that success. People usually say, "You're lucky," as a way to express admiration or envy, but it often comes from a place of detachment. It places the outcome outside of personal control as if success were handed out randomly. This way of thinking creates a passive mindset, one that underestimates the power of discipline, preparation, and perseverance. It suggests that if you haven't succeeded, it's simply because luck didn't choose you, and that's a disempowering belief. Highly intelligent people avoid this phrase because they understand that while chance can play a role in life, it's rarely the full story. Most accomplishments result from intentional action, from late nights of study, relentless problem solving, building skills, learning from failure, and showing up when it would have been easier to quit. They recognize that preparation creates the conditions where opportunity can actually matter. Instead of saying, "You're lucky," a more thoughtful response might be, "You've worked really hard for that," or "You deserve that. Your effort shows." This kind of recognition doesn't just honor the achievement, it acknowledges the journey. It reinforces the idea that success is something we can all strive for through action, not chance. This mindset is beautifully summed up in a quote by the Stoic philosopher Seneca: "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." In Stoic philosophy, luck is not some mystical force, it's a byproduct of a life lived with purpose, focus, and effort. The Stoics believe that while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can always control how we prepare for life's opportunities and how we respond when they arise. Here's a practical tip. The next time you feel tempted to say someone is lucky, pause and consider the full picture. Ask yourself, what kind of work or mindset likely led to this result? Compliment their dedication or consistency instead. This shift not only deepens your appreciation of their achievement, but also helps you build a mindset that values growth, not just outcomes. Because intelligent people know success isn't about being chosen by luck. It's about choosing to show up again and again, even when no one is watching. And that's something we all have the power to do. The phrase, "I'm not good at that," is something we've all said at some point, whether in response to a new task, a difficult skill, or an intimidating challenge. While it might seem like a harmless confession, this statement often masks a deeper issue, a fixed mindset. It suggests that ability is static, that our skills are set in stone, and that struggling with something means we're simply not cut out for it. This mindset can quietly sabotage growth. It discourages us from trying, from practicing, and from persisting. It can prevent us from signing up for new opportunities, speaking up in meetings, or pushing through difficult learning curves. The danger of "I'm not good at that" isn't that it acknowledges a gap in skill, but that it often implies that the gap can't be closed. Highly intelligent people avoid this phrase because they understand that intelligence isn't fixed, it evolves. They see every weakness as a starting point, not a permanent label. Whether it's learning a new language, mastering a technical skill, or navigating interpersonal dynamics, they embrace challenges as invitations to grow rather than proof of inadequacy. Instead of saying, "I'm not good at that," they might say, "I'm still learning that," or "I'd like to improve at that." These reframe responses aren't just more positive, they reflect a growth mindset, a belief that effort, practice, and persistence can lead to meaningful progress. This mindset doesn't ignore struggle, it simply refuses to be defined by it. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor and philosopher, wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." This line perfectly captures the Stoic approach to obstacles. Rather than avoiding difficulty, the Stoics believe that confronting it is how we grow stronger. In their view, the very thing that challenges us is often the key to our transformation if we choose to engage with it. Here's a practical tip. The next time you catch yourself thinking or saying, "I'm not good at that," pause and reframe. Try saying, "I'm working on getting better at that," or "This is a chance for me to grow." You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be open. Each attempt, each mistake, and each small improvement adds up over time, because intelligent people know that being not good at something today doesn't define who you are. What defines you is how you respond. And the most powerful response is one rooted in resilience, curiosity, and the belief that with effort you can improve at anything. Throughout this video, we've explored 10 common phrases that highly intelligent people avoid, not because these words are offensive or wrong, but because they subtly limit our growth, our relationships, and our mindset. Phrases like, I already know that, that's not my problem, I don't care, or that's impossible, reflect fixed thinking, defensiveness, or resignation. In contrast, intelligent people choose language that promotes curiosity, humility, empathy, and a willingness to learn. We saw how phrases such as, I can't do that, or I'm not good at that, can trap us in self doubt, while reframing them to, I'll figure it out, or I'm still learning, opens the door to growth. And instead of dismissing success with you're lucky, they recognize effort and preparation. These alternative approaches aren't just about sounding more positive, they're about reshaping our reality through the way we think and speak. Now, here's your challenge. Take a moment to reflect. Which of these phrases do you catch yourself using most often? Which one has been holding you back at work, in your relationships, or in your personal growth? And more importantly, which one are you most excited to let go of? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what resonated most with you, because words shape thoughts, and thoughts shape actions. By making small, intentional shifts in our language, we can dramatically transform how we face challenges, connect with others, and move through the world. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, the quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your life. And our words are often the doorway to those thoughts. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might benefit from this message. Let's continue building a community of thoughtful, curious, and resilient individuals, one phrase at a time.